They called it a corpse. A cold, lifeless rock drifting on the far edge of surveyed space, too quiet, too empty, too worthless to even fight over. A planet-stamped deed in bold red letters crossed the Galactic Property Exchange. No atmosphere worth breathing. No energy signatures. No ruins. No life. A scam listing, and you bought it. Pause for effect. Before we go any further, if you enjoy stories where humanity survives, not because it's stronger, but because it's stubborn, clever, and terrifyingly adaptable, subscribe now. These stories only get darker, smarter, and far more satisfying from here. Now, let's talk about the planet they said wasn't alive. You remember the laughter. It echoed through the auction chamber, dozens of species packed into a floating amphitheater of glass and light. Tall avians clicking their beaks. Gelatinous traders rippling with amusement. Insectoid brokers flashing color patterns that translated to pity. And then there was the auctioneer. This final lot, it announced, voice perfectly neutral, is being sold as is. Designation, KX784. Common name, Ashfall. Classification, biologically inert. No refunds. No refunds. That was the punchline. You sat there anyway, one human representative among hundreds, hands folded, breathing slow, listening as the price plummeted. World-class survey teams had already passed it over. The planet had been scanned 3 times by 3 different empires. Each result the same. Dead. No magnetic field worth noting. No detectable biosignatures. Atmospheric composition thin, dusty, chemically boring. Surface temperatures brutal. Radiation levels inconsistent and strange, but not useful. The galaxy had decided Ashfall was a joke. So when your paddle rose, the room didn't go silent. It laughed harder. A senior negotiator from the Verix Combine leaned toward you, mandibles twitching. Human, it buzzed, amusement tripping from every syllable. You are aware this is waste, yes? You didn't look at it. You were staring at the data slate in your hand, because you'd noticed something no one else had bothered to care about. The radiation wasn't random. It pulsed, irregularly, weak, almost shy, like a heartbeat buried under stone. The auctioneer paused. Bid accepted. Final sale price, the equivalent of 3 obsolete cargo haulers and 1 cultural archive. More laughter. Someone actually applauded. You smiled politely, thanked the auctioneer, and left with ownership of a planet no one wanted. That was 5 standard years ago. The first colony ship nearly turned back. Ashfall looked worse up close, an endless landscape of cracked black stone. Ash storms that scraped against hull plating, sky stained a dull copper gray. The star it orbited was old and angry, throwing radiation tantrums that would have fried lesser shielding. Sensors still read nothing. No plants, no animals. No microbes detectable by standard galactic instruments. Command, your pilot said quietly. Are we sure about this? You watched the storm patterns crawl across the planet's surface like living scars. Yes, you replied. Put us down. The moment boots touched ground, the instruments went haywire. Human instruments. Seismographs picked up micro vibrations. Atmospheric samplers found chemical chains too complex to be random. Thermal sensors registered heat blooming briefly beneath the surface, then vanishing. The planet wasn't dead. It was holding its breath. Humanity had seen this before. Earth had taught you a hard lesson early in your evolution. Life doesn't need permission to exist. It doesn't announce itself. It adapts, burrows, hides, waits. You drilled. Not deep at first, just enough to sample the crust. The drill bit shattered, not because the rock was hard, because it was flexible. It bent, pulled back, and sealed behind the drill as if it had never been there. You remember the silence in the command tent after that. No one spoke. No one laughed. Because the ground beneath your feet was reacting. The first proof didn't come from a lab. It came from a mistake. A technician collapsed during an ash storm, oxygen scrubber damaged, lungs burning. You dragged him into shelter, expecting the worst. He lived. More than that, his recovery time was impossible. Scar tissue dissolved. Lung capacity improved beyond baseline human norms. A med scanner flagged foreign compounds in his bloodstream. Not parasites, symbiotes, microscopic structures that bonded temporarily, repaired damage, then disintegrated. The planet had healed him. That's when you realized the truth. Ashfall wasn't dead. It was dormant. A planetary-scale life form, its biology so slow, so deeply integrated into geology, that fast-moving galactic scanners missed it entirely. No surface life, no forests, no oceans. Just layers upon layers of adaptive matter, responding to stress, radiation, intrusion. It didn't fight you. It studied you. And when it understood you weren't a threat, it helped. Human settlements spread carefully. You didn't terraform. You negotiated. You built structures that flexed with the ground. You timed power surges with radiation pulses. You learned which areas warmed when approached, which cooled when ignored. The planet learned back. Radiation storms weakened near human habitats. Ash density dropped. Subsurface heat vents aligned beneath reactors, boosting efficiency by 30%. Your scientists stopped calling it ashfall. They called it KX784', a living world that didn't grow life. It was life. 5 years later, humanity announced its findings. You expected disbelief. You didn't expect panic. The Galactic Survey Authority issued a priority alert within hours. Their instruments suddenly recalibrated, using human data lit up with patterns they couldn't unsee. Ashfall wasn't unique. It was rare but not singular. Dormant worlds. Sleeping planets. Entire classes of life the galaxy had ignored because they didn't fit established definitions. Definitions the GSA had built its reputation on. The property exchange froze. Contracts were reviewed. Auditors descended like carrion birds. And then the message arrived. Official, cold, legally airtight. Notice of dispute. The planetary body designated KX784 was sold under the classification biologically inert. New evidence suggests material misrepresentation. The Galactic Property Exchange formally requests renegotiation, compensation, or return of asset. Return. You read that word twice. Then a third time. Return the planet. The living planet that had healed your people, sheltered your colonies, trusted you. You forwarded the message to Earth. The reply came back in under 10 minutes. Just one sentence. They sold us a dead planet. That was their mistake. The galaxy wanted a refund. Humanity had something else in mind. And KX784'? It was waking up. The refund demand didn't arrive alone. It brought friends. Within a single rotation of KX784', your comma rays lit up with encrypted signals from half a dozen galactic authorities. Trade councils, survey boards, environmental tribunals that had never cared about dead rocks before. They all wanted meetings. They all used the same words. Oversight, shared responsibility, correction of error. You noticed what none of them said. None of them said congratulations. None of them said thank you. None of them said we were wrong. Instead, they said the discovery of a planetary-scale life form had significant implications for interstellar law, that the original sale had been conducted under false pretenses, that continued human occupation might constitute biological exploitation. You watched the messages scroll past on the main display, arms folded, face calm. Behind you, the colony dome hung soft, rhythmic, like a sleeping animal breathing. KX-784 Prime was listening. The first delegation arrived in orbit 3 days later. They didn't land. They didn't have to. Their ships formed a neat, intimidating arc above the planet's Terminator line-sleek hulls, polished insignia, weapon ports conspicuously not concealed. A show of concern, not aggression. At least, that is what the Varex Combine ambassador called it when his image flickered to life in your command chamber. "You must understand," he said, mandibles twitching in what passed for a diplomatic smile. "This situation is unprecedented. You sold us the planet," you replied evenly. "Legally, publicly, permanently. Yes, yes, but under the assumption it was inert." You leaned back slightly. "And it was," you said. "According to your definitions." The ambassador's eyes narrowed. "Words matter, human." "They do," you agreed. "That's why your contract does not contain the phrase, 'unless proven otherwise.'" Silence. Somewhere deep below, the ground warmed by a fraction of a degree. They escalated, not with weapons, with lawyers. A joint injunction froze all trade routes connected to KX-784 Prime. Insurance guilds voided coverage for ships entering the system. Media networks flooded the infosphere with dire speculation. Humanity exploits sentient world unknown planetary. Entity at risk galaxy demands accountability. You watched it unfold with the tired patience of a species that had been blamed for worse. Earth had been accused of overfishing oceans, strip-mining continents, poisoning skies. Sometimes the accusations were fair. This time they weren't, because humanity wasn't taking from KX-784 Prime. It was giving energy stabilization, radiation buffering, structural harmony. Your cities were designed not to dominate the terrain, but to sync with it. When inspectors demanded access, you granted it. You let them walk the ash plains, scan the ground, deploy drones. Their instruments still read nothing. They grew frustrated. "How can a planet be alive without metabolism?" one scientist snapped. You didn't answer. You simply handed her a human scanner. Her crest feathers rose in shock as data flooded her display. Micro-movements, stress responses, chemical exchanges spanning kilometers. "This is impossible," she whispered. "No," you said softly. "It's unfamiliar." The first threat came quietly. A Varex patrol ship strayed too close to the surface during a routine survey. Its shields flickered. Power readings dipped. Then the ship lost altitude. Not violently, gently, as if the gravity beneath it had decided to pay closer attention. Pilots panicked. Thrusters screamed. The ship recovered, but not before its hull registered deep structural stress, as though it had brushed against something vast and unseen. The Combine issued a formal protest. You replied with a single line of telemetry. Gravitational flux maps, showing localized adjustments. KX-784 Prime had nudged them, not to harm, to warn. That's when the word sentient started appearing more often. And with it, fear. Because if the planet was sentient, then galactic law shifted dramatically. Sentient entities could not be owned, could not be sold, could not be exploited, which meant the original sale was invalid, which meant humanity was squatting on stolen property, and which meant the galaxy needed a solution. They proposed a trusteeship, shared control. Human presence reduced to advisory capacity. You laughed. Actually laughed. The sound startled the delegation on screen. You're asking us to abandon a world that chose us, you said. Because your instruments failed? Because the galaxy must be protected, the envoy replied stiffly. You leaned forward. From what? Another pause. No one answered. KX 784 Prime answered instead. Across the planet, dormant regions stirred. Not violently, purposefully. Seismic readings spiked not earthquakes, but patterns. Vast subterranean networks realigning, like muscles stretching after a long sleep. Radiation storms shifted away from population centers entirely. In orbit, the delegation's ships detected subtle interference, harmless, but unmistakable. The planet was learning faster now. Learning them. Human scientists realized something chilling. KX 784 Prime wasn't just reacting. It was choosing sides. The breaking point came during the emergency conclave. 100 species represented, thousands watching. The chamber filled with light and tension. The proposal was simple. Humanity would receive compensation for development costs. KX 784 Prime would be placed under galactic protection. Access would be restricted. Study would continue. The refund, in other words. You stood when it was your turn to speak. No theatrics. No raised voice. Just truth. You declared this world dead because it didn't resemble you. You said. Because it didn't bloom or crawl or scream into your sensors. You gestured, and the display behind you changed. Human cities nestled into the terrain. Energy graphs synchronized with planetary rhythms. Medical data showing enhanced recovery, reduced disease. We listened, you continued. We adapted. We didn't conquer. A murmur spread. And now, you finished. You want it back, not because you care, but because you're afraid of what you missed. The cherubim attempted to interrupt. The chamber lights flickered. Just once. Every delegate's instruments spiked simultaneously. A shared sensation washed through the hall, not pain, not fear. Awareness. For the briefest moment, every species felt the same thing. Pressure, immensity. A presence that was not hostile, but was absolutely capable of being so. KX 784 Prime had reached out, not to attack, to introduce itself. The connection broke. Silence followed. Then chaos. Emergency protocols triggered across the station. Ships powered weapons reflexively, then powered them down just as fast when their systems refused to lock. The planet hadn't disabled them. It had ignored them. Like gnats. The vote never happened. It couldn't. No one wanted to be the species that provoked the living world. And no one wanted to admit that humans, unremarkable, short-lived, painfully adaptable humans, had made first contact with an entirely new class of life. By accident. On purpose. Later, alone in your command chamber, you felt the hum beneath your feet deepen. The planet was fully awake now. Not hostile. Curious. Protective. You placed a hand on the floor. You don't have to do this, you whispered. The warmth beneath your palm answered. A question, not in words. In intent. Will they take you away? You swallowed. No, you said. They won't, because humanity had made a decision. If the galaxy wanted a refund, they'd have to explain it. To the planet. The galaxy doesn't panic loudly. It tightens procedures. It reclassifies threats. It updates doctrines. 3 cycles after the conclave collapsed, KX 784 Prime was no longer referred to as a planetary anomaly. It received a designation reserved for nightmares. Class Omega Biospatial Entity. a category so rarely used that most species assumed it was theoretical a placeholder for threats too large, too alien, too catastrophic to exist outside simulations. World eaters, reality distorters, extinction vectors, and now, a planet. Humanity watched the classification spread through secure channels, knowing exactly what came next. Containment. The fleets assembled far from KX-784 Prime at first. Not one empire's armada, but many. Coalition task forces under the banner of mutual defense. Ships designed not for conquest, but suppression. Gravitational anchors. Null field generators. Planetary interdiction arrays. Weapons meant to pin gods. You stood in the operations dome, surrounded by projections of hostile vectors. Your officers spoke in calm, clipped tones. Humans had learned long ago that panic wasted oxygen. "They're calling it a quarantine," your strategist said. "No ships in. No ships out. And if we resist," someone asked, "they escalate." Of course they would, because the galaxy had reached its favorite solution. If you can't understand it, control it. KX-784 Prime felt the change immediately. You didn't need instruments to tell you. The hum beneath the city altered pitch lower, heavier. Ash storms paused mid-cycle, as if the planet itself were listening harder. It was afraid, not of the fleets, of being alone again. You had learned enough of its language by now to feel that truth settle into your bones. You knelt, palm pressed to the ground. "They're scared," you said quietly. "And when they're scared, they do stupid things." The warmth beneath your hand pulsed. A question: will you leave? Humanity's answer came before you could speak. The transmission went out on all bands. Open, unencrypted. Earth, Mars, Luna. Belt habitats, fringe colonies. Every human voice speaking as one. This is humanity. No threats, no speeches. Just a statement of presence. KX-784 Prime is under human protection. Not as property, not as a weapon, as a partner. The pause that followed was deliberate. "We will not end in a world for trusting us." Silence. Then the fleets moved closer. The first shot was never fired, because the planet moved first. Space around KX-784 Prime bent. Not violently, elegantly. Gravitational fields shifted in layered waves, like a giant adjusting its posture. The incoming interdiction array failed to lock its targeting algorithms, unable to reconcile changing constants. Ships drifted. Formation broke. Commanders shouted. KX-784 Prime wasn't attacking. It was standing up. Sensors went blind as electromagnetic noise bloomed, not chaotic, but structured. A planetary nervous system asserting itself across orbital space. And for the first time, the galaxy saw it clearly. The planet wasn't a sphere of rock with life on it. It was life wrapped around a sphere of rock. A single organism spanning crust, mantle, and core. Energy flowed through it like blood. Tectonic plates acted as muscle groups. Radiation pulses served as sensory input. An intelligence that fought in centuries. And it was very, very awake. Panic finally broke containment. Some captains ordered retreats. Others did something far worse. They fired. Gravitational lances struck the planet's upper atmosphere, designed to destabilize mass and crack worlds apart. The beams hit and vanished, absorbed, diffused, rerouted along pathways that had existed long before the first starship ever burned fuel. The planet did not retaliate. Instead, every hostile ship experienced the same thing. Their hulls remembered gravity. Not crushing, not tearing, Just enough. Enough to remind fragile metal shells that space was not theirs to command. Weapons shut down. Reactors throttled back. Crews gasped as internal gravity shifted by fractions that nonetheless stole breath and courage alike. A message echoed through every system. Not words. Intent. Stop. The fleet stopped. In the aftermath, the galaxy stared at itself in horror. They had pointed weapons at a living world. A world that had responded with restraint. That was the part no one could explain away. Predators lashed out. Machines calculated. Gods destroyed. But this thing had chosen mercy. And humanity stood between it and the stars like stubborn children, guarding a wounded animal twice the size of a mountain. Negotiations resumed, very differently. No more demands. No more ultimatums. Just questions. What does it want? What does it need? What happens if there are others like it? You answered honestly. It wants coexistence, you said. It needs stability. And if there are others, you let the sentence hang. Then the galaxy has been very lucky humanity found one first. That truth settled like frost. Because humans didn't react to the planet with fear. They reacted with familiarity. Earth had taught you well. Earthquakes, storms, viruses, evolution itself. You didn't conquer nature. You learned how to survive alongside it. The final agreement took months. KX-784 Prime was recognized as a sovereign entity. Humanity became its official liaison species, not rulers, not owners, but translators between planetary consciousness and the wider galaxy. The quarantine was lifted. Trade resumed. The refund request? Withdrawn quietly. No one wanted their name attached to that embarrassment. Years later, new discoveries followed. Dormant worlds began to wake slowly, cautiously, as if responding to a signal, not a call. A reassurance. You are not alone. Human scientists theorized that KX-784 Prime had always been listening for others like itself. And now, through humanity, it had found a voice. On your last day as planetary liaison, you stood at the edge of the city, watching ash clouds drift harmlessly past structures grown in harmony with the land. You placed your hand on the ground one final time. We did okay, you said. The planet's response was warm. Proud. You stayed. You smiled. Yeah, you whispered. We always do. Because that's the thing the galaxy finally understood. Humans don't survive because they're strongest. They survive because when something trusts them, they don't walk away, even if the entire universe tells them they should.